Have you ever seen a situation where everyone seems to do their job correctly, by the book, but the final outcome is just a complete and utter disaster? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into. We're looking at a real-life case where following the rules to the letter actually allowed a very dangerous suspect to walk free. And it's a story that, honestly, it reveals a huge, deep flaw in our legal system.
And this all brings us to this really central and kind of disturbing question. How is it possible that a person suspected of child molestation, who's also wanted by federal agents, can just be released from a local jail, and then when they find him again, he's somehow legally untouchable? It sounds like something that just shouldn't happen, but it did. So let's unpack exactly how.
So, here's the sequence of events. It all went down in St. Paul, Minnesota. A man gets arrested by the local police for child molestation. Now, federal ICE agents send over what's called a detainer, which is basically a request saying, hey, hold on to this guy for us. But the local police release him on bail anyway. Later, ICE agents track him down to a fenced-off construction site, but they couldn't go in. They were literally stopped in their tracks, legally barred from entering to rearrest him. So what was this invisible wall? Well, the answer lies in the paperwork. It's all about a critical legal difference between two types of warrants, which, it turns out, operate in two completely separate worlds. Okay, so first up, you have the administrative warrant. The easiest way to think about this is like an internal permission slip. It's signed by a supervisor inside an agency, like ICE, and it gives their agents the authority to make an arrest. But, and this is the huge catch, that power pretty much stops at the front door of any private area. It's not a master key. Then you have the judicial warrant. Now, this is the one you've probably seen in movies. It's the real deal. It's signed by a neutral federal judge. It requires probable cause. And this one gives authorities the power to go into private, non-public places to get their guy. So let's put them right next to each other to see the difference. The administrative warrant, that's an internal agency sign-off, good for public spaces. The judicial warrant, that's a key granted by a court after neutral oversight, and it unlocks the door to private property. That one little distinction, it's everything in this story. And that brings us right back to that fenced construction site. Because it was considered a non-public space, ICE's administrative warrant was basically useless. To get in there legally and make the arrest, they needed that judicial warrant. So the obvious question you're probably asking is, okay, so why didn't they just go get one? And this is where a simple-sounding legal solution collides with a mind-blowing logistical nightmare. The phrase, just get a judge, seems so easy, but when you look at the numbers, you realize the system is just not built for this. Let's start with raw capacity. In the entire United States, there are only about 1,220 federal district and magistrate judges. That's it. That's the total workforce available to sign these warrants, on top of all their other jobs. You know, running criminal trials, handling civil cases, all of it. Now let's look at the potential demand. If ICE needed to get a judicial warrant for enforcement actions against just 1% of the undocumented population with final removal orders, they would need over 140,000 of them. In a single year, the math just doesn't add up. It's not even close. And this chart really shows you the problem in a nutshell. Look at that massive gap. On the one hand, you have this tiny little bar for our federal judges, and on the other, you have this absolute skyscraper of a bar for the number of warrants needed. Even if every single judge did nothing but sign these warrants 24/7, the system would just completely buckle. The source material we're looking at really just says it perfectly. Requiring judicial warrants for intrusive ICE entries at scale is structurally impossible. Not difficult, not resource-intensive, impossible. So we're not talking about a challenge that we can just throw money at. We're talking about something that is literally, mathematically impossible with the way things are set up right now. So if everybody knows it's impossible, why on earth do you hear political groups and even local governments demanding it? Well, this is where we have to switch gears from logistics and start talking about pure political strategy. Because the demand itself serves a purpose, even if it can never actually be met. See, demanding something that you know can't be done is a classic political tactic. It isn't about making a workable policy. It's about staking out a moral position, signaling your values to your voters and donors. And, here's the key, it's about tying your opponent's hands. By demanding a judicial warrant for every single entry, you can effectively grind enforcement to a halt, not through a new law, but through a procedural bottleneck. It's a very clever strategic move. So now let's bring this all full circle back to the case in St. Paul. We can actually map out exactly how all these different things, local politics, legal rules, and logistical reality, all crashed into each other to create a total system failure. Here's the chain reaction, step by step. First, the local police let the suspect go. Why? To avoid getting sued for holding him based on ICE's request without a judge's order. Second, ICE fines him, but they hit that legal brick wall at the private worksite. Third, the simple solution of getting a judicial warrant is actually impossible because of that massive bottleneck we just talked about. And the final outcome? The whole system just seizes up. It's a procedural deadlock, and the dangerous suspect stays free. And this is probably the most crucial point to understand. It's so easy to point fingers and assign blame here. But the truth is, no single group is choosing to let this person go free. The police are following their local rules, ICE is operating within its legal limits, and the courts are just completely overwhelmed. The failure is actually built into the architecture of the system itself. So, in the end, this St. Paul case, it's not some bizarre one-in-a-million fluke. It's the totally predictable, logical result of a system where a really good legal idea, requiring a judge's oversight, smashes headfirst into the hard wall of operational impossibility. And that leaves us with a really big, uncomfortable final question. When you have a problem that isn't caused by bad people making bad choices, but by the very design of the system itself, how do you even start to fix it? That's a challenge that goes way beyond this one case, and it gets to the heart of the tension between our legal ideals and what our institutions are actually capable of doing.